Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Justice and Pieces guest speaker series as we look at talking with some of the lawyer and paralegal bencher candidates in the upcoming Law Society bencher elections. As always, the views are of the candidates alone, and they don't reflect me, Justice and Pieces, Trias College, or any of the other education institutions or organizations that I'm affiliated with. Today, we have Barbara joining us. So, first of all, thank you, Barbara, for taking the time to speak with us. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, thank you, JP. I really appreciate you having me today. And I have to say thank you before I introduce who I am. Say thank you for interviewing all 19 candidates for the paralegal benchers. I think it's really important that our voters learn about each and every one, because there are more than 5 that will be amazing for us. But it's important that each voter take a look and see who is going to be the best fit. So thank you for doing that. I really, really appreciate it. As far as who am I, my name is Barbara Jones. Some of my ex-students might know me as Barbara Gordon-Elliot. I've changed my name, but it's still the same person. I am a paralegal. I was licensed in 2015. I actually waited a year because in 2015 was the year that the paralegal licensing exam got hard. And I wanted to prove to my supervising lawyer that, okay, I'll take that challenge and I'll write the hard exam. So it's not just, an afterthought of getting in. I've been a paralegal educator for 7 years. And I think if you asked my kids, who am I am, I'm not someone who likes talking about myself. So you have to forgive me for a bit, but I'm thoughtful, I'm caring. I am someone that would prefer to lead by example. I think that my actions speak much louder than my words. And if you take a look at what I've done the last 7 years, it's pretty obvious that I'm dedicated to the paralegal profession and ensuring that the future of our profession is set up for success. That's what I'm really passionate about. I am a problem solver. I am a lifelong learner. And that was brought to my attention the other day by one of my students who looked at my LinkedIn and said, "Well, you went to the University of Waterloo." I said, "Yes." "You went to Ryerson?" I said, "Yes." "You went to Royal Roads University?" "Yes." And all of these things are at different points in my life where I wanted to know more. And even as of last year, I'm involved in doing my master's. So I'm a lifelong learner. Some would say that I'm a motivator. I expect high things for myself. I set the bar very high, but I also expect others to do the same. And if a lot of people who struggle with their confidence, especially my students, I like to build them up and show them that they can be successful. And that's one of the things why mooting is so important to me. I started the mooting at Sheridan College with my students 6 years ago, as soon as I became a professor here. And I really enjoy that because I can watch someone who doesn't believe in themselves go through a process and then at the end of the mooting day think, oh my goodness, this is exactly where I need to be. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, I mean, I just literally got off talking to a couple of your students there about mooting, so certainly can attest to that. But maybe that's a conversation for another day. Today, I want to talk about why you're running for bencher. So maybe you can start with just, I know this is not the first go at it. So what brought you back here the second time, and what are you hoping to accomplish?
Well, the reason why I'm back is because of those students that you're talking about. I have taught probably over 1,000 students in the last 7 years, and many of them are not in the paralegal profession. Many are still in the legal profession, but many have left the profession as a paralegal and they've gone on to law school, they've become lawyers. And so the reason why I am back is because I do not think that the path that we are on is sustainable for paralegals, yet the access to justice crisis is still happening. The gap has not narrowed, and paralegals are a critical part of the solution for that. And I believe that I have something to offer. I think I have a unique perspective. It's multi-generational. I think that I've dedicated the last 7 years um, to improving the profession, and I'm hitting walls at the college level, and I can't make any more changes because the competencies that are set by the Law Society. So if I want to improve something in education, I can't do it here. I have to do it somewhere else. And I see the path being at the Paralegal Standing Committee. In that committee, I really think my voice is needed. So that's why I'm running again.
Now, in terms of, I mean, we'll certainly get into that, but in terms of other things there that you see as important in this election, maybe you can share some of the other things you'd hope you can bring to convocation, and then hope from there it could result in change.
Well, I think I have a pretty good understanding of what the role of a bencher is. And it concerns me a little bit that some of the other candidates that are running, they're making promises that they're not going to be able to achieve as a bencher. As a bencher, we're a director of a corporation, and the corporation is the Law Society. And we have a commitment to serve the interests of the public first. And then the second thing would be looking at our profession. But the number one goal is to serve the best for the public's interest. And my position is that those two things for paralegals don't have to be mutually exclusive. And a lot of the things that are important to paralegals are also really important to the public. And if I became a bencher, I think that I would really try to see if we could reform how it looks at convocation. I think we do need 2 more spots as for paralegal benchers. We have 5, I think we need 7. We can't do that without getting a legislative amendment, but there can be a recommendation coming from the Law Society that we need this. There are 8 lay benchers. I think that needs to be increased. I think that the public needs to have a bigger voice, because the public's voice and our voice is the same voice. We need to narrow the gap for access to justice. And I really believe that paralegals have a significant role in that. And 40 lawyer benchers, I'm thinking that that probably has to come down. And the other thing that I'm really concerned about is this moment in time. What's different today that didn't exist 4 years ago is now we have 2 slates running on the lawyer side. We have Full Stop, and we have the Good Governance Coalition. And that sends out a red flag to me that there's some dysfunction happening in the lawyers profession, and they're making a lot of noise. And what happens if we lose the privilege of self-regulation? And we are regulated by the Law Society, both of us, lawyers and paralegals. What happens if the government comes in? What is it going to look like for us as paralegals? And other candidates are and paralegals who are not candidates, who I've been talking to, they're talking a lot about self-regulation. And in the last 4 years, I've thought about that. And I've attended meetings talking about, well, what would that look like? And unfortunately, we as a paralegal profession, we are not united. And that's another goal of mine. I want to create building blocks that that allows us to become a united profession. There are so many people who are passionate about the paralegal profession, and there's some loud voices out there who are running for bencher. And we need all of us in order to move the peanut forward, so to speak. And we need to have one association outside of the LSO. And then we need strong people in the role of bencher who understand what the role of bencher is.
So yeah, let's start with that. I mean, because I know if we start with education, we may not leave that topic.
That's true.
But how can, I mean, in terms of uniting, let's say, the paralegals, or getting more kind of discussions in terms of an advocacy type of role, right? I mean, you have the Ontario Paralegal Association. Again, I'm not maybe the most knowledgeable of what's going on there, but from hearing from students and recent grads and people that have been involved, I mean, the same thing that you're echoing, right, is that it's kind of everyone's all over the place, and we're not sure what exactly is best for the profession. And you put it quite correctly, right, is that the 5 benchers, whoever they may be, are elected to be looking at the public interest, right? And same with the 40 lawyer and the 8 lay benchers, right? I mean, that's supposed to be their mission, their mandate. And it does create this and certainly I always feel kind of awkward sometimes when it's like the lawyers are on the firing squad, so to speak, and I'm like, wait a second, I'm a lawyer. I've been teaching paralegal students for how many years? I'm heavily invested in your growth as well, but it kind of creates this paralegals versus lawyers mentality, especially when it comes with scope, right?
Yeah.
That it's these lawyers, I hear are holding back paralegals, right? And so how do you create those building blocks, as you point out, to bring the
Well,
profession licensees, all licensees together, and specifically the paralegals you were talking about?
well, I think that we get input from them. So legal professionals, lawyers, paralegals, we make decisions based on fact, right? Yet we are in general terrible at data collection for our own profession. And we go out and, well, the benchers will go out and hire a third party to get the data that we need to show whether or not it's worth the risk of expanding our scope, say, for example. So why not reach out to the paralegals, all of them, and say, we want to expand our scope and we need to get some feedback from people who are working in this. For example, let's talk about immigration, for example. There are lots of paralegals who are immigration consultants right now, or who are practicing competently in immigration. Should we be practicing in immigration as paralegals? My position is absolutely 100%. So why not ask those paralegals to provide some data that we can use so that we can go back to convocation and say, here's the real data. You're worried about X, Y, and Z, but here's some real statistics with some real value and with some successes. And then at convocation, instead of convocation, when I listen to all the debates, it talks about all of the reasons why we shouldn't do something, and change that narrative into, well, why not? We have a body created that is going to discipline us. If the public has a problem with anything that we do, they are going to complain to the Law Society. The Law Society is going to investigate. They are going to go to a tribunal. And then if that person, that paralegal, is not competent, they will not be practicing in that area. So it's all about risk management. Instead of putting up the barriers and the roadblocks, let's get together, let's give them the facts that they need, and let's make different decisions.
And I guess that kind of goes in hand with what, if anything, right, in terms of, again, as a bencher coming back. I mean, as the current grouping exists, right? I mean, I know both lawyer and paralegal candidates have talked about electoral reform, and if
Yes.
it's reducing the number overall for better governance or increasing certain areas. But as it stands right now, I mean, you need 20, even if all the paralegal benchers and even if all the paralegal and lay benchers were united that, let's say, immigration needs to be, more people need to be working in it, or family law or whatever, you still need the support of 14 of the lawyer benchers, right, to get like a majority there. So what are some of the things there that, it's easy to say, we need immigration, but as you point out, with that data, like, what do we need to look at in terms of a transition plan of what else is needed? Because I mean, I've had some candidates say basically, hey, we're paralegals, we're licensees, we're just like you're licensed. You may want to do family law tomorrow because you were talking to all these family lawyers, but you can do it. I mean, I don't even think I had a family law course. I had to, on the licensing exam, pass that part. But other than that, there's nothing stopping me. So why should there be any barriers stopping you?
But wouldn't there be something stopping you, JP? Would you be able to hang a shingle and just say, I am a family law lawyer, without having any experiential training?
No, I wouldn't, right?
Work
And
underneath another lawyer?
it's the rules of professional conduct for one thing, but the fact is, I would certainly first go and say, hey, I have all these friends, I brought all these guests that are in family law, and why don't I go and approach them and say, I need this mentorship, if not just go and work for someone or shadow them, and then maybe I'd feel a little confident, and then I would continue that, right? I mean, I think
Exactly.
we're going to be talking, I'm sure, where maybe this is sort of our segue into it, but
Mm.
there are paralegals that are leaving the profession in high numbers, right? I get the calls after, certainly I help with the licensing exam. So when I get 4 to 6 weeks later, hey, guess what, JP, I passed. They put a post on, it used to be Robert Bird, would be like 30 seconds later, welcome to the
Congratulations.
profession,
Yes.
right? And then about 6 weeks later, I think like last week these came out, I saw the I don't know what it's called, but essentially what's up on the wall behind you, right? The certificate that you are now a licensed paralegal.
Yeah.
And then some students I'll hear from over the years, right? As you do as well. And then others I see on their LinkedIn, they're doing something else. And, if there's like a kind of networking event I'm putting on, I sort of connect current students and past students. It gets challenging, right? Because they're still, like you say, in the legal field somewhere, but they're not practicing as paralegals.
Yeah.
And I guess let's get into your thoughts on that, because I know we probably want to talk about it. What is the issue there, and what can be done from the Law Society's perspective as a bencher? Because I know we can talk probably another day of what schools can be doing and what we can be doing, but what should the Law Society be doing about that?
Competencies need to change. So what can we do? What could I do as a bencher in the role of the paralegal standing committee? All 5 benchers are automatically appointed to that committee. They are responsible for looking at the curriculum, making recommendations for change. If you take a look at the last convocation and the report that was provided by Michelle Lamazo, it's very robust, and they have made a lot of recommendations, and they are looking at implementing these changes. When it came to convocation, it was for information only. They did not have to get the vote from lawyer benchers. This is what they were going to do to raise the bar, raise the standards for paralegal students. And one of the things that they did was they increased the field practicum hours from 120 hours to 240. And I have been looking for that for years. And I know that jurisdictionally that could be a problem. And for the smaller colleges, it may be a problem, but it is a very big problem with the reason why students aren't staying in the profession when they graduate is because they don't have that training. They're not practice ready when they graduate. And I did a research project last year on my own. I wasn't paid for it. And I took a look at 3 professional diplomas that are offered here at Sheridan College. And I did a comparative study of them. They were practical nursing, social service workers, and paralegal. And all 3 of those are regulated by a professional body. And I went out to the different professional regulatory bodies, and I asked them questions. The 2 that I'm not a part of were more transparent than the Law Society. And that was an issue for me. I couldn't get the data that I needed to really have a good look at what is happening here. But I can tell you that the amount of field practicum hours that happen in those other 2 designations, and they're both 2-year programs. This comparative study was apples to apples. Was in my graph, the paralegals was really, really, really tiny, and social service workers and practical nursing is this big. Why is that? It's embedded in their programs. So it's not outside of the term. We're not looking at making students find some way to earn a living for a month. OSAP does not qualify, or OSAP will not provide students with any kind of support when it's outside of our term. So that's one issue that's happening inside that I know about that I'm not sure that the Law Society would know about. But I just think without that training component, we're not setting them up for success. So, okay, if we can't find a placement, then why don't we create something inside, a simulator? Why don't we go to Durham College and say, Durham, we know that you're connected to the Durham Legal Clinic. How can we mimic that at every other college? This is what is needed. If we don't have this, we're going to continue to lose competent, amazing students who should be paralegals today.
Yeah, I mean, I think the data, the former treasurer, Teresa Donnelly, and again, I've been at many different schools in the last couple of years where she's like, you could probably do this PowerPoint now. But I would always pause where she looks at the numbers in the different areas and the numbers that are not in the profession. And is that a typo sometimes? Mm-hmm. And has there been any, have they reached out to paralegals that are licensed? I mean, again, in this election, I understand, if you're licensed but are not practicing, you probably can vote. So they have the ability to connect with those individuals. And, even like a simple, what are you doing? Why didn't you continue on in your practice? And any, reason why, right? I mean, Is that kind of like the data you're looking for, or is it
That
something more expansive?
100%, that is the data that I'm looking for. And even the data that my college collects, generally we graduate 115 to 125 students every year. This year it's going to be significantly lower, and that's another challenge that we're having that we can talk about in a minute. But in the 2 years that I looked at, they sent out an email to our alumni. They had 11 responses. Well, out of 115, and I get 11 responses, how is that? How can I see anything? I know because I keep connected with my students and the alumni, and I know when I see them drop off, and I know when they say, I can't do this anymore. I can't tell you how many of them have told me that they get a job. Well, first of all, they can't get an entry-level job as a paralegal. They're always hired as legal assistants and law clerks, and we need to change that. We need to figure out how to do that differently. But if they are able to get a job as a paralegal, often they're going to hear in the hallways, you're just a glorified legal assistant. Well, no, they're not. They're trained to provide legal advice, and they're really, really good. And actually, there's a lot of paralegals that have found their own niche on their own, and they're making it work, and it's in the tribunals. There's lots and lots of opportunities. And I try to tell my students every day, there are opportunities out there. You have to break that ceiling. You're worth it. You can do it. And they're practicing successfully there, and they're probably doing it a whole lot better than lawyers. So it's not a competency issue. It's just, how do we create these pathways? And I think that education is part of creating that pathway. Right now, the bridge is out. We need to build the bridge, and we need to identify the barriers that are stopping paralegals from staying in the profession, from stopping them from getting a job as a paralegal. And if it's mentorship, then how do we create that? And it's a responsibility of all of us as paralegals to bring along the future of the profession. We can't keep our nose down and do nothing. And the amount of voters that came out the last election, I think it was around 17%. It's not enough. I know that every paralegal is a passionate paralegal about our craft, but we need to be passionate about the future of our profession, and we need to get involved. And the one thing that I hope that if nothing else, people vote this term. I hope that they vote.
Yeah, so I mean, you touched on the sort of numbers as well, right? I mean, sort of all across the board, right? I mean, if you kind of follow how many are now coming into programs, going through the programs, going on and writing the licensing exam. I mean, even there, like sometimes there's equity barriers. I mean, in terms of the costs, right? I think I was telling students today how much it costs, and they were like, well, I better pass because I was like, save up your holiday money from grandma for next March if you're going to write then. But this the same thing, right? I mean, looking at all of these different sort of points where people can kind of go out, and then even once you've gone through all of that, now it's not, and then if you were to go look 5 years later, I mean, it's even probably smaller, right? But I mean, is that, Sana, we were talking before about scope, is that part of it? Like if there's more things you can do, or is it more of, like you mentioned, that are we not suggesting or guiding or having the mentorship in areas out of, let's say, the big three, because like there are some excellent paralegals that are thriving. And, I think there's like a 500 plus tribunals. I think it was Samantha Glass once came and talked to me and said she was told it was like 1,000 different tribunals. And, I mean, obviously not every single one on its own could be an entire practice, but is it more, we need more scope, or we need kind of other areas to be focused on? And if so, then how do we get that to the forefront, again, from the role of the Law Society?
Well, I think it goes back again to we have to be more flexible at the Law Society. And right now we're taking one approach, and we're coming up with all the reasons why we can't expand our scope. So let's talk about the FLSP license. I think that, well, this is difficult to talk about because I am grateful for the work that went into that FLSP license. I know that all of them did everything they could to make it happen, but it's been 7 years since the Boncalo report, right? Since 2016, I think. I don't think we went far enough. I think we needed to make one more move. I think when the judiciary came back and said, no, we don't accept any of the models that you proposed, and that the colleges were ready to accept, and the scope became much, much smaller, that's when it was like, well, this is no longer an additional license. This is just part of our scope. So I think that we should have gone back to the table at the Paralegal Standing Committee. I think we should have done some more data collection. And I think that we should have suggested that maybe we set a minimum standard for competency to include that in our curriculum, and then have another concurrent solution of a case-by-case basis. So let's take a look at the paralegals who are out there. Who's working for a family law lawyer as a legal assistant right now? Have they got the mentorship? Do they have the education? Asking a paralegal to go out and pay for 4 months of additional education, and then writing another exam, and then carrying this additional license for the amount of scope that we had for the FLSP it's not going to work. And the colleges, if you make it an option, they're not going to offer it. So when it comes back in 2 years for review, I don't think that it's going to be successful. I think that, or I hope that it comes back at convocation, and that we say, okay, let's try again, and let's scrap the FLSP as a license and just embed it into the current P1 license. And then how you asked me, okay, well, so what about expanding the scope? It's all about a flexible approach, right? So we do it by a case-by-case basis. We ask everybody who ventures out into a new part of our scope to provide data. We need concrete data to say it's working. And without that, then the barriers will just keep the why we can't do something will continue to be there. But if we change the narrative and say, why not? And we know that we have the body that is going to address any complaints that happens with the public, the needs of the public, they need family law to be addressed. They need to have an affordable solution. And I think that what happened with the FLSP license was actually, unfortunately, it was made because something is better than nothing. And I don't agree. Something is not better than nothing for the paralegal profession. It definitely wasn't better for the public. So.
And I guess that goes kind of back. We talked about sort of, you still need the support of 27 benchers total, right? And assuming, let's say, again, you get the 13 that say, yes, I mean, we need this. We see the reports from 2016. Then what is it that's needed, I guess, in terms of convincing the lawyer benches, right? That would say, I mean, what can you do? I mean, is it pointing to like, here's the data, here's what's needed, here's what we can provide, here's JP, you shouldn't be afraid because here's the quality of paralegals you're getting that are already working in family law. So it's not like that you're having people that aren't knowledgeable about what they're doing. But I mean, is there any more strategies in terms of kind of getting that information across that may be seen as kind of potentially the barrier there to expanding something to what it may have needed to be from the reports in 2016?
I really think it's all about data and collaboration, of course. It goes without saying that you have to get along with and make relationships with lawyer ventures, because there's 5 of us and there's 40 of them, and we need to convince people to see things our way. But I think that lawyers make decisions with fact. And if we can provide them with the facts, how could they possibly say, yeah, I don't agree with you? Or like, what's the argument? Is it a passionate argument? Are they then protecting their own? And I don't mean to say that it's an us versus them, because I don't think it is. And I think that there is some big change happening overall. And I see that with the new generation of lawyers. A lot of them know who we are as paralegals. They know what we do, and they know how competent we are. And it all depends on who is elected in this election. And that's why this election is so critical on the lawyer side, is we need people that are in it for the right reasons and want to see access to justice. They want to see that gap narrowed, and they want to see the access to justice crisis reduced. It's in the last 4 years, it's just gotten worse. And COVID, that was a big part of it. But we need to make a change. And I think that they're ready to work with us. I really do. I think that we're on the same page.
Yeah, I mean, I always joke it's like the I call it the Meghan Markleization, using from Suits there, because a lot of people, as you mentioned, when they hear, I mean, if you went on Indeed, I think I was telling some of your students this last week, the same thing, right? If you go on and you see like legal assistant slash paralegal slash law clerk, and then, well, that's not really a paralegal position, right? But if that's what, and again, because it goes back to, as you point out, it's only been 15 years, right? So there's lawyers that have been practicing. I'm certainly spoken to a bunch in the last couple of weeks that, if they've been practicing for 20 plus years, I mean, what their understanding of a paralegal is, and forget about the public, right? I mean, these are licensees, then they're not going to get that you have this scope. And often I have these conversations when we're looking for hosts, or I'm just talking to colleagues like, what's a paralegal? That seems to be part of the miscommunication or the misunderstanding, that, as you point out, when you get to younger generation lawyers, newer calls that are working side by side in firms with paralegals, then they understand that. And I know the law study certainly had some initiatives a few years ago where they had the paralegals are licensees. I think I remember on the subway when I used to take it into to teach, you would see those pictures there. But I mean, is there anything more from the law studies perspective of kind of bringing paralegals to the forefront in terms of that understanding? And again, what should be coming from the Law Society, and what needs to be coming from the
Outside.
OPA or anywhere else, right? And I think that's kind of the issue I see is twofold, right? Is, well, one is, what should the benchers be doing? What should the Law Society be doing? And then what should everybody else be doing, right? I mean, and it should be going hand in hand. And that's the same thing, even with the lawyer candidates, right? It's the question of, well, what should be the Law Society's role, and what should be, all these other organizations and the general licensees' role in everything.
Right. So exactly. And that's why I'm concerned that some of the people that are running for bencher don't really understand the role of a bencher, and what they're passionate about needs to change, but it's not going to happen at the LSO. And where we're going to get public opinion to change about who we are, and to even know who we are, it's going to be from outside of the LSO. We need the voices that I'm hearing loudly to really get on board, and let's get a marketing campaign. Let's figure it out. We need one voice. We don't need 6 associations. We need one association to all get together. And I've seen a lot of really positive developments. I'm not on Facebook right now, and I'm not going to be on Facebook until the election's over. But there was one group, specifically with LTB, that there was a lot of camaraderie, and they were helping each other, because the LTB has completely changed since COVID. And the baseline, everybody started at the same level, so they're all working through the portal changes that seem to happen every week, and they're sharing the links so that people can observe. And there's a lot of positivity in that group. I don't see any toxicity. Unfortunately, in the last 4 years, I've seen a lot of toxicity in Facebook, and it saddened me. And that's basically why I'm not there right now. I'm going to be out there on LinkedIn, and I would like, and having an opportunity to speak with you is amazing. And anybody who wants to talk to me, I would love to hear your opinions. I would love to know what you're thinking, and what do you want changed, and how can we do this? Because like you said, after this election, we still have so much work to do outside of the Law Society. So let's figure out a way to come together and make that happen. If we don't, 4 years down the road, what is it going to look like? What if the government decides that they've lost confidence in the lawyers regulating themselves, and then we get sort of caught up with that, and suddenly there's a board that comes from the government that governs us, and they don't really know anything about us, and we lose the opportunity of having our professional representation at the table. Even though it's only 5, it's better than nothing, right? So
So besides what we've sort of been talking about, I mean, I don't know if there's anything else that you've been thinking of in preparing for this run, and from talking to, I mean, I'm sure a lot of your former students reached out, but no others in the profession.
Mhm.
What else can, from your role, if you're elected as bencher, do you see as things that the Law Society needs to be working on, um, again, in the public interest?
I think that we need to not focus on the noise, and we need to have the opportunity to get our work done. And we need to take a look at that paralegal report for improvements to education, and we need to get more into that. We need to talk to the other colleges and as reach out to the stakeholders, ask them, is this going to work for you? What are the barriers? And then eliminate the barriers, because it's not going to be a one size fits all solution. It's going to be a lot of flexibility, and that's going to take a lot of work from a bencher. And then outside of the LSO, we really need some loud voices to do the work, to do a marketing campaign and get it out there to the public who we are. Because I think that I can safely say that every one of us as paralegals has had our client refer to us as lawyers. And I correct my clients all the time, say, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a paralegal. And they say, yeah, well, it's too hard to explain what a paralegal is, so you're my lawyer. And that happens again and again and again. And we need to change that narrative too. And that's not the Law Society's responsibility. That's our responsibility as paralegals. So we need to have continually feedback to our profession, what we need to do individually to make our profession better. We all have a responsibility to do that.
Now, I guess getting back to education here for probably the rest of it, is there anything in terms of either incentives, let's say the Law Society can have to get more of that mentorship, especially now we're going into 240 hours. I don't know exactly when that's going to sort of be officially rolled out, but I mean, and again, and not just obviously in the internship, but as we've been talking about, more so after becoming licensed, right? Like I know there's been, and I'm sure Michelle will point out that they're looking at these pathway programs, right, of for new sole practitioners, and there's the coaching advisory network. But I mean, is there something that can be done in addition to that that kind of addresses what we've talked about with this sort of gap from becoming licensed and then, let's say, practicing and then continuing to practice?
Well, I think that in the curriculum, it needs to be embedded. So in the colleges like mine, who we know how to do that, we can just mimic what has already happened with practical nursing or social service workers, and we can create a program that's still within 2 years and an embedded program. And then with the colleges who are too small to do that, just ensure that we work with the people who are responsible for field placement and come up with ways that give an authentic training environment. And if that's creating a curriculum that looks like running a working file, but reduce the number of like, instead of having 6 weeks to do an assignment, let's do it in a week. Let's make it authentic. You don't have 6 weeks in the real world to prepare for a file. You have, sometimes a couple of weeks, but it's just about how we do the training. We need to put a focus on training. Our theory is fantastic. We learn everything we need to know about how to interpret legislation. Legal writing is good. The substance of the law is well taught, I think, across the board. What is missing is training. So we need to sit down with a bunch of people around the table and start bringing up ideas on how can we make this different. I have lots of ideas, and I'm sure other people too. But don't leave that room until we have some solutions, and not a one size fits all, because they won't be a one size fits all.
Yeah, I mean, I think from being a coordinator and from being in education like yourself for 7+ years, is like, well, I don't even know who, like, are there other members of the paralegal standing committee? That are there opportunities to have, I mean, even just having the chair of the paralegal standing committee just meet once or twice a year with all the program coordinators, right,
That
at
would
all the
be
college.
that would be fantastic. And Robert Bird is very familiar with who I am, and so is Michelle Lamazo, because I am in their inbox a lot. And when I was working on my research report to try to figure out, okay, what can we do better here at my college to improve the paralegal program, I was asking them, do you have this? Do you have that? Do you know this? Do you know that? And they always took my call, which I appreciated, but there needs to be more. And I think what you just said by, okay, let's meet with all of the coordinators. Fantastic. I am a part-time professor or a contract professor at Sheridan College. And I have been asking anybody who will take me, can I be a part of a focus group? Can I be on a committee? I don't want to be remunerated. I want to have input. And I've heard from my colleagues at other colleges that they feel this exactly the same way. They want their input to be heard. And how do we make that happen? So absolutely, the communication between the colleges and the Law Society has to get better. And we need to create some more opportunities for that to happen.
And I guess now with the licensing exam, I think last week we were chatting about it. I think it
Yes.
just went out. So I mean, any thoughts in terms of, I mean, now it's gone back in person, but it's 4.5 hours, or it's, I guess, suggested, of that 4.5 hours, you can take a break and go to the bathroom or rest or whatever. But 160 questions, 4.5 hours. I mean, is
Yeah.
that a good overview there to determine if you're meeting the competence requirement to be licensed there, or there's something else need to be looked at? Or, I mean, any thoughts on that?
Great question, JP. Like, are we really testing the competency of the students? I don't know. I know that there are students in my classroom that are terrible at multiple choice, but they're amazing in every other way. And they do understand the material. It's just multiple choice exams for whatever the reason. They freeze, and suddenly they have challenges. And I know that there are several paralegal licensees now who struggled with the exam, just the way that the structure of it, and took a couple of times to write it. But now they're the best paralegals ever, and they're highly respected. So what I would like to see is a competency-based exam. And other regulatory bodies like the College of Nursing, they are changing their exams to a competency-based exam. That's going to require resources from the Law Society. They need to take a look at that. And the questions are asked in a way that it really tests, does this student understand the material, yes or no? Instead of, okay, I can memorize this for a couple of days and then it's gone. And when you told me last week when we were talking that it's now 4.5 hours, for me, that was a red flag, because the exam I wrote was 7.5 hours, 2 sessions. And how is 4.5 hours okay? It concerns me that when we pass that licensing exam, we can go and hang a shingle. I would like to see some sort of mentorship where, like mediators, they have to have a certain number of hours before they can be on their own and practice in a certain area. There are areas that we want to practice in, like family law, like immigration, that just because we can interpret the legislation and understand the rules and procedures of the courts, that it doesn't mean that we get that area of law without the mentorship, right? So there has to take some responsibility on each licensee, that we go out and we find these opportunities, and they're there. And the opportunities, again, in the tribunals are amazing. And that's what my specialty is here at Sheridan. I teach administrative law. I push, go find those opportunities. They exist. And but what I worry about is, once they find those opportunities, paralegals become successful and they put their nose down and they're happy in their lane. And they need to recognize that we have a responsibility for the people coming behind us, for the profession as a whole, that they need to take a turn back, and they need to offer those mentorship opportunities for the future coming up. So let them shadow you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, and I guess sort of, where's that the Law Society in getting or I mean, maybe they shouldn't be, right? Maybe that needs to be coming from the profession and saying,
Mhm.
look, you need to, I mean, certainly, obviously, there's things that count for, your CPD hours, right? If you
Sure.
have students and things like that. But because I mean, it kind of goes to, we were chatting about this before, right now. Well, you have all these additional hours that need to be done, but um, if students are kind of, I mean, I have students that are working full-time jobs, right? And then they're like, I got to take 2 weeks vacation to do my internship hours.
Yeah.
Otherwise I can't get them done. And then
Yeah.
on the other hand, there's paralegals that will say, hey, I'd love to provide mentorship for students, but I don't necessarily have the ability to afford something that's paid, right? And it kind of creates this situation like that what it can something be done that kind of addresses, I mean, because I know from the lawyer perspective with articling, there was a whole, should
Mhm.
articles be paid? And one of the points on the other side of not is that, well, some people won't take on articling students as a result. So
Mhm.
if you're choosing between unpaid and none, is that better than nothing, right? As we've been talking about, or is that like a basic requirement? So I don't know. I mean, it's still a shorter scale, but still, I mean, 240 hours is kind of significant for, I think about those students that I worry what's going to happen. How are they going to make it work?
You know,
Or maybe it's something that can be done over the year. Maybe this is another solution, right?
well, for sure, like have it done, have it in two semesters maybe. But JP, really, I'm really concerned if we don't do this, that the students that you're concerned about, they're not going to stay in the profession anyway, because they won't make it. Like they can't stay in it long enough to make enough money to justify the roadblocks that they keep coming up. So they have to get over. Will they get over the roadblock? Absolutely. But most of them are not in a privileged position where they don't have to worry about how much they're being paid. I was talking to a student or a former student a couple of weeks ago. She's been a paralegal for 3 years, and she works for a firm that employs both lawyers and paralegals. And she's hit the ceiling for paralegals, and she's really good at what she does. And the ceiling was $52,000 a year. That's not enough. That's not enough if you want to own a home. That's not enough if you have a family. That's not enough if you're driving into the city. It's just not enough. So she went and she found a headhunter who found her a job at another law firm who understands the value that what she does every day. And now she's had a $30,000 increase plus a $10,000 signing bonus for doing exactly the same thing she was doing at the firm before. So there's some education that has to happen at all around the table. And I think, again, it's not an us versus them thing, lawyers versus paralegals, because I think there are enough lawyers out there that see, okay, I get where paralegals fit, and there's room for all of us, clearly, because there is an access to justice crisis. They want to solve it too. There's a real push for work-life balance for a lot of professionals today. The generation behind us isn't about working 80 hours a week. That was my generation, right? But that's not the generation today. They're looking at 4-day work weeks, and there's room for paralegals. We are going to be part of the solution, and I think that they're going to embrace us. And I think if we can just get the right benchers voted in, and that we can get to work at the Law Society and take a look at trends that are happening, take a look at other professional bodies and what are they doing, and what can we bring to change the way we govern ourselves, and how can we raise the standards of paralegals.
Perfect. So I guess I always end with last couple of questions here, and I think certainly you've probably share every day you're teaching with your students words of wisdom as they look, and we've had sort of a very extensive conversation about education and the path to success there. But anything you can share for any students of mine or anyone else, I'm sure some of your students are watching right now. Any words of wisdom for them as they look to get into the profession?
Don't give up. It's a great profession to get into. There's a lot of work to be done, and you have a responsibility to yourself and to your profession. That's what I tell my students every day. It's not just you, it's not just I, and we have to network, we have to get involved. going to mooting competitions is one way I get them involved when they're in school. But once they get out, we need to have that association. I've encouraged them, start an association, be that person, be a leader in our profession, and we can get there together if we're united. So that's what I tell them.
Perfect. And then the final question here, and thanks so much, Barbara, for taking the time to speak with me here today, is, there are paralegals listening, right? Unfortunately, I don't have a vote, but for any of the paralegals that are listening, that are going to vote, and as you echoed before, and I can echo here, make sure you are voting regardless of who it is.
Yes.
I mean, I can say at least I've listened to lots of people. If nothing, I'm probably one of the most informed people now. But everyone has had valid points, right? I can't say, no one said something of value in here, but everyone's got these valid points. But now in listening to you today, Barbara, why should one of those 5 votes go to you?
Well, I want you to take a look at all 19 candidates and really choose the person that you think is going to be able to move our profession forward. And I think there are more than 5. I wish there were more seats, but there aren't. But just take a look at us as individuals and listen to what we bring to the table. I think I bring a unique view. I bring the student perspective, the future of our profession. I have all of their voices in my head and behind me. And if they could all vote, then I think that I might actually be successful in this. But unfortunately, many of those voices are not paralegals anymore. And it's for them. That's the reason why I'm running. And I'm going to need some other people who weren't my students to say, hey, you know what? I remember a professor who made a difference, and maybe she's that person, and maybe she's the right person for this job. And I think I am. I think that I have their voice, I have their back, and the future of our profession is with the students. And if we continue to have missed opportunities because there isn't a voice at the table that understands the perspective of the student, I think that we're going to have trouble expanding our scope and being successful long term. So I have the future in mind. So I hope that you consider voting for me.
Perfect. So thanks once again for taking the time and talking with me. I wish you all the best, and thanks for everyone for tuning in. Take care.
Thank you.